one podcast, mining the Magic the Gathering subreddits for salt. This is the Howling Salt Mine.
It's the Howling Salt Mine. The Howling Salt Mine.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Howling Salt Mine podcast, the podcast where we delve into those salty mines of the Magic the Gathering community, find the saltiest stories we can find, and bring them back up and share them with you, our dear prospectors. As always, I'm your host, Sam, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Mike. Say hey, Mike.
Hey, everybody.
And we're also joined today by our guest co-host, Nick. What's up, Nick?
Hey, Nick.
Nice. So consistent.
Yep.
Every
Gotta keep the
time.
tradition alive at this point.
You really do. Yeah, you really do. Hey, do you guys remember when Tony said that the musical wasn't going to disrupt his involvement with the podcast?
And then he's missed like 4 weeks of
Classic Tony.
episodes.
Yeah.
Do you remember the last time we played Magic with Tony? Because I
No, I don't.
don't.
I'm not sure we ever did.
don't.
Yeah, I
It's
think it was just
gone.
Pat, and we misremembered it.
Yeah, we
That's
like
probably
typoed when we
accurate.
were filling out the spreadsheet. We're like, I think this was Tony on this, right? Yeah, on this game.
Poor Pat. Just get uncredited.
But yeah, man, Tony, he's musicaling it right now.
That's a phrase. Verbing.
He's
I think-
verbing it.
It's very peopled.
Either at this point or in the next couple weeks, there's going to be a really interesting Stray Grains episode that comes out on our Patreon that details how much of a shit show the musical is for Tony.
Yeah.
Has he been venting separately?
Yes.
Yeah. So we won't dive into
Nice.
it now, but suffice to say, I think he wishes that he was just playing Magic with us on Tuesdays
Yeah.
and being on the podcast more.
I don't think he'll be in many more musicals after this.
Yeah.
At least not right now.
That Detroit suburb musical theater group, community musical theater, I'm sure is really top-notch stuff right there.
Dude, it's like you've like no idea. It's like crushing his poor little soul.
Musical karaoke.
Oh boy.
I think we have like a good 10-minute vent.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's going up.
It's a great plug to subscribe to the Patreon, folks.
It really is.
Exactly. And if you were in the musical with Tony, tune in to hear what he says. And you probably agree, so it's cool, you know?
Yeah, I feel like if Tony told you about the podcast, you're probably one of the cool ones.
Exactly. Yeah, you're probably on the level with how shitty it is. Man, so what's new with you, Nick? How's your music stuff going, dude?
I've been slowing down a bit. I got really back into street photography again, so that's been my focus as of late. But yeah, it's going well. Just got back from vacation, as you guys know, but now I'm here,
Love it.
back in the East Coast.
Do you still have dreams of like doing part-time stuff and for your full-time job and like doing photography in the mornings and shit?
I mean, I have dreams of it. Whether or not that will be a reality.
You
is
have
a
realities of it?
different thing. No. I mean, I sneak out during my lunch breaks is my big thing because I'm downtown.
Nice.
So I'll go out during lunch and then meander for a while and then come back.
That's great.
So good way to do it. And then out on the weekends too. Usually walk like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours on Saturdays and Sundays.
It's cool to see you and some of the other patrons talk about photography in our Discord. And I'm just like, yep, those are cameras. And you guys are like, oh, wow. So you have this thing on it? And I'm like, yeah, cameras.
It's great because it's like the experience that everyone else has watching you talk about Game Boys. It's like, there's something so soothing listening to people or reading people talk about something
Oh,
they
yeah,
love that you just
definitely.
don't understand at all.
Yep.
I mean, we like confirmed have listeners of this podcast that don't know how to play Magic the Gathering and just like our banter.
Mike's sister doesn't count. Come on.
I think there
Hey,
are others.
don't say that about her. She
There
counts.
are definitely others. Yeah, she's a patron. She counts double.
Fair. Fair.
But there are definitely others that just have like no idea. Like Tony's friend Aaron and other people. My friend
All two of them.
Yeah, all two of them.
Who have direct relation with people on the podcast.
I was about to say my friend Maddie, who used to play Magic and still kind of knows the rules a little bit, but doesn't really play. But that's also a person with a personal connection. So we are going to be delving into the salty mines. We got some salty stories cooked up for you today, and we're going to be talking about salt today.
Sweet.
Yep.
Nick, do you want to say the thing? Do you want to be Tony?
No.
But Sam, what's salt?
I do not want to be Tony.
Great question, Mike. Salt is frustration in the game. It is when, you get pub stomped, you're sitting down with your brand new casual pre-con, and someone's like, I got something that's pre-con level, and they're dropping fast mana, they're crushing you super fast, and it's just an unpleasant game. Salt can also be something that other players at the table give you because they have shitty behaviors that just like bum you out in a major way. Salt exists in a lot of different ways, and we talk about it so we can help ourselves be less salty.
It's cathartic.
It is.
Exactly. It really is cathartic. And a little bit of Schadenfreude, or whatever, however you say that word.
I'm convinced there's a German word for everything.
Yeah, I think there is.
I think there's a German word for that, for being convinced there's a German word for everything.
I had one the other day that I'm pretty sure exists, but it's the luckily discovering something that is inherently bad. So like something you by chance you discover something that's bad that's happening, but it's good that you discovered it because it happened early enough. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you went in for an X-ray because you thought your arm was hurting and it's cancer, but you got the cancer early. There's probably a German word for that, I'm sure.
Dude, that literally exactly happened to me the other day. So the other day we're recording a podcast, and I come downstairs after we're done. It's like 11:30 or close to midnight or something. And it was on March 2nd. I remember because my birthday was the next day. And I'm coming downstairs and go on the first floor. I've still got some lights on down there. So I'm filling up my water bottle. I'm turning off lights. And I hear this like hissing sound. I'm like, what the fuck is that? And it sounds kind of like the hiss that a faucet gives when it's running, but like louder. And it's coming from our first floor bathroom. I'm like, that's weird. So I go in the bathroom and I'm like snooping around and, kind of hunting around. I'm like, what the fuck is going on in here? And I'm like, oh man, I think it's coming from the basement. So I go down in the basement and I see like a puddle of water, like 20 feet wide, like slowly spreading around my water heater. And I was like, oh shit. And the puddle, thankfully, was, just like a skim of water, but it was spreading, right? Like perfectly caught it at the perfect moment. It probably opened up like 15 minutes prior. Yeah. Maybe a little bit more.
You got lucky.
Got super lucky. So the hiss is because the water heater is empty, but it's still like blasting as if it were full, like blasting the heat. Yeah. So the water that is trickling in is just getting immediately boiled off and like shooting up out of the vent on top of the water heater and making this like horrible hissing sound.
Oh no.
So I'm like, okay, what the fuck do I do? Mom and Dad, what's up, Mom and Dad? Help me. Thankfully, my parents are like night owls now that they're both retired. They stay up till like 2 and 3 a.m. and send me cat memes all night.
Nice. Wow, what a treat to wake up to.
Yeah, it's the best. It is a treat, actually. I wake up to like 3 to 4 cat memes from both of my parents like every day.
That's great.
Wow.
So I call them and they're like, okay, you got to call a plumber right now. There are emergency 24-hour plumber services. I'm like, okay, well, like I'll figure that out. I can do it. And then I also like send them a video of like, I take like a full video of the water heater so they can see what the fuck is going on. And I find a big old leak on the back. So I call the plumber. They're like, nah, we can't come. And I call another one and they're like, oh yeah, we can't either. And I'm like, motherfucker. So I have to figure out.
That's probably better that way. If you can figure out how to shut the water off, at least get you to morning. So you're not paying like crazy money.
True. Like I definitely would have saved money, but the next day was going to be one of the huge snowstorms. So I'm like, God damn it. Like we're about to, and I have forced hot water in my house.
And a pregnant wife.
So I'm like, damn, we're about to like have a very cold house potentially. A couple of YouTube videos later, I learned how to turn off a water heater safely and do so. And then, the water at that point, it wasn't so bad. I set up the dehumidifier. It was all dry by the next day. And like call my parents back up. And I'm like, thanks, Mom and Dad. I think it's all set. I got a plumber coming in the morning. I was able to set something up that night for the next morning. And, look at the clock. It's like 12:05. And I'm like, I guess it's my birthday. And they were like, happy birthday, I guess. We'll call you in the morning. It's like, sweet. What a great way to turn 33.
Yeah.
And then, went up to bed and had a fitful night's sleep, hoping that the house wasn't like burning down.
YouTube tutorials are the shit though, because there's always some like mildly Southern accent guy who will teach you everything you need to know about how to fix the thing. I fixed my shower that way. Replace the valve in my shower off a YouTube video.
YouTube is like the best for home ownership. Like the amount of middle-aged dads that have free time on their hand and are cool with having just like, 1,000 YouTube subscribers and being like, that's my peak right now. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad that they're all just doing it and putting out the same video more or less because they're so good.
Yeah.
Very informative.
If you want peak YouTube dad videos, Essential Craftsman on YouTube is like one of my favorite YouTube channels.
Ooh.
He's this like 60-year-old like guy in like Oregon, and he was like a carpenter and a logger, and he's just the nicest, chillest dude, and he just teaches you all about tools, and it's just like, I could listen to this guy talk forever because it's just so enjoyable. Would definitely recommend.
I love that. I will have to check that out. In a similar vein, I've been getting super into like tool restoration videos. If you guys ever are interested in like watching something kind of handy craftsmanship, and they don't even talk either. It's like ASMR. It's just like the sound of like just like grinding something, and then the sound of like like a sandblast nozzle just like blasting the paint off something, and you're just like, oh man, like he really did restore that 1950s cheese cutter.
Have you started watching machinist videos yet? Because that's the next step down that rabbit hole.
No, I need to.
Oh, people with lathes have a lot to say, and they're also very enjoyable.
Yep, I have seen some of those. There's been some overlap where sometimes they're like, should I restore this old bolt, or should I just lathe one fresh out of a hunk of metal? And you're like, what? You can do this? And they're like, here we go. I just made a tiny screw, tiny custom 1920 screw that they don't make anymore.
I also love the ones where it's like staying outside with only an axe and a fire starter in like negative 30-degree weather. And it's like, ooh. But it's got the same thing. It's just like a video of like the sounds of someone's footsteps crunching through dry leaves. And it's like, that's nice.
Man, there's this other one called like Covert Camping or something like that. I forget the name, but it's this guy up in Canada, and he basically does overnight camping in places you're not supposed to. So he'll go in like a bush in the middle of a rotary or a roundabout, wherever you call it, depending on where you live, and just like scamper in there when there aren't any cars and set up a tent and just hang out there all night and tape himself. And he always like drinks a beer that somebody sends him. And he's like, oh, I got this beer from so-and-so, and like has a weird little camp meal and just like chills. And it's very relaxing. Really, really cool stuff.
Nice.
You know what else is really relaxing and very, very cool stuff? Listening to salty Reddit posts about Magic the Gathering.
Let's get into it, guys. Our first story comes to us from Gmail. And the first thing I want to do is apologize to this listener, because this has been sitting in our Gmail for a really long time.
Oh, no.
We got this like last winter, and it just hung around, and I forgot to say it, and got lost in our tracking sheet. So we're going to say it now.
Oops.
So thank you to Brennan for sending this one in. And the story goes, hey guys, new to the podcast and really enjoying it. Well, I hope you're still listening to it, Brennan.
No, he's out now. He's like, those bastards didn't send me. It's the Stan email.
Me.
Dear Sam, I wrote you, but you still ain't calling.
He goes on and says, I have a salty tale to share that I think is worth discussing. This all happened this past summer at Command Fest Montreal. It was my first experience playing EDH with strangers. I like to think my playgroup is pretty light on salt. So this one particular game I played at Command Fest has stuck with me for the sheer saltiness I saw firsthand. I think the event I was playing was an odd number because I ended up with only 2 others in my pod. That's usually where things go awry with a lot of these stories, 3-player games.
Mm-hmm.
The commanders are not really relevant to the situation. What is relevant was that I was playing my janky Gerard Golgari Lichlord plus Relentless Rats deck. We love Relentless Rats deck.
We love rats.
The game was progressing and everyone was hitting their lands, building up their board, pretty salt-free. Well, that was until one of my opponents dropped a Tree of Perdition. The round passes, neither I nor the other player drew any solutions or removal. The opponent with the tree on board gets to his turn and chooses the other player at the table to target. The player who went down to 13 is essentially a pillar of salt at this point and does everything in his power to bring down the tree owner. The opponent with the tree is going right back at him. It's a full-on blood feud. It goes back and forth until they're both under 5 life. I'd flown under the radar enough to set up myself to drain both opponents with Gerard and buffed up Relentless Rats. And that was game. I had won. Except it didn't really feel like I had won, since they were driven into mutual salt rage and just went after each other. My deck didn't perform really well. I didn't have any big plays. I was pretty much the third wheel to the Hatfields and the McCoys. Should I brush it off and consider a win, even as salt led to their mutually assured destruction? Thanks.
Yeah, 3-player games, man. That's the nature of the beast, is that if you get one person gets focused and the other person retaliates, then the third person just gets to kind of sit there and watch. So I feel that, but also those are typically enough of a one-off that you just kind of let it go. And you got the win. So, hey, whatever, count it. Put it on the
Write
board.
it down.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think 3-player games they generally either become a 2-on-1 or 2 people are duking it out and one person just like swoops in. Like if you ever start a feud in a 3-player game, like that's the person who's not in the feud is probably going to come out on top unless you totally overwhelm, And
they also have no reason to dissuade like the feud from happening. Like sometimes in a 4-player game, one of the 2 non-feuding players will start to like get in a lead, and then the other non-feuding player will be like, guys, I need you to put it to rest right now. And we got to deal with this.
Right.
But
like,
if you don't have that extra voice, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think with 3 players, the other one is that you kind of get the circular targeting too, which I think is probably the best way a 3-player game goes, where it stays pretty balanced and everybody kind of rebuts everybody else, but it definitely can lend itself to like one player is either so far ahead or so far isolated from the rest of the play. So
yeah, and those are sort of the only play patterns that a 3-person game like just realistically can go, from like a perspective of just those are the options. There aren't other things that can happen. With 4-player games, you have so many combinations of who can be in the lead, which players, how many, like who's targeting who at that point in the game. Whereas it just really is exponentially a simpler setup with just the 3 players.
That's why you got to always play Pramicon so people can only attack to the right or the left. Really make it even and fair. I do want to read Tree of Perdition because I feel like, that's like the impetus for the salt here.
Totally. Some of these cards are cool.
Tree of Perdition is it costs 4 mana. It's 3 and a black. It's a creature plant, and it is a 0/13. It has Defender, and it has a single activated ability. You tap the tree, and you exchange target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness. So basically, you can like zap somebody down to 13 life as soon as Tree of Perdition can untap. So, obviously, this was designed for a 20 life format, where it's like, wow, 7 damage is pretty great. when it's in a 40 life format, it like kind of fucks pretty hard.
Don't forget the wombo combo with Triskaidekaphobia.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Nick, where you like make someone's life 13 and then you're like, sweet, now I can win with Triskaidekaphobia.
I was joking. No one ever actually does that.
I think you can, though.
You definitely can, but I don't think that's a combo a lot of people include in their deck unless it's a flavor win.
The Vorthos players are screaming at their radios now.
Their radios.
At their AM radios.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a couple of Sorin flavored effects where he just sets people's life total to 10. Like I remember I had like not heard from some of my other Magic playing buddies in a little while, and they had like just started getting back into Commander, and I like got on to, build one of their first home built Commander decks because they'd just been playing with friends decks and stuff. And we were talking about stuff and they were like, and also Sorin's effect should be banned. And I was like, whoa. Where did this come from? There's a story here. It's that same thing though, like just getting your life total set to some number. It actually does fit into one of the categories that the rules committee says is a reason they ban things, which is things that aren't designed for the format, that aren't designed for the multiplayer format, or are too strong compared to what they're supposed to be doing.
I will say I like never see Tree of Perdition pretty much ever.
No. I remember, I think it was Iconic Masters, and that was spoiled as one of the rares in the packs.
Yeah.
And people were very mad because it's like a 20-cent rare. It's like not like it's just not a good value card. So I'm impressed that whoever this person was running it in the first place. I'm surprised to see it, to be honest with you.
I think it was set at Mythic at some point too.
It is Mythic.
It's Mythic and Bolt.
I think you're right.
It's Mythic and
Jumpstart and Eldritch Moon. That's crazy. Or is that anyway? Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it's such a weird card. There is a guy in like my other Magic play group, this guy Nate. Shout out to Nate if you're listening, you salty bastard. He's like the saltiest dude in that group, always making salty decks and then also like getting really salty when people get salty about his decks. It's like this very funny loop. Anyways, he runs Tree Perdition in one of his decks specifically to piss people off. And surprise, after he trees somebody, they kill him. Like they put all their resources into knocking him off the table. I think it's just one of those things where it's so tilting to be isolated like that and be like, okay, you lose 27 life. And you're like, great. Well, I'm going to lose now. And honestly, Tree gets hefty. Like if someone's at 40 life, you get a 0-40.
It's not quite on theme, but there's the one Orzhov Angel Commander. Selenia Dark Angel is a 3 white black flying, counts as an angel, pay 2 life, returns Selenia to its owner's hand. So there's builds of that deck that are built around exchanging life totals, because you can pay for Selenia's stack or Selenia's ability repeatedly on the stack to basically just drain your whole life total and then swap it with somebody. So you can like pay 2 life, then pay 2 life, then pay 2 life, then pay 2 life. And then after you've done like that, payment like 38, what is it? 16 times, 18 times? Yeah. Math times. Then you use something like a Tree of Perdition effect to exchange your life total with somebody else. And then they're at like 2 and then you ding them.
Yeah. I think there's one, it's like pay in kind, I want to say, where everybody's life total, either you exchange life totals or everybody's life total becomes the same. But there's a bunch of effects like that in black. The other interesting thing is when your life total changes like that, it is considered life loss. So if you have like Mike, what's that 1 mana creature that you love so goddamn much that lets you regain life?
Children of Corliss.
Children of Corliss.
Is that a cleric, Mike?
It is a cleric. It is a cleric, and it has sacrifice it. You gain life equal to the life you've lost this turn. So it's so funny if you have any life loss effect.
Yeah.
Like Bolas's Citadel.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do with it where you basically like drain your own life, exchange life totals, or, even drain your life, do pay in kind. So everybody's life total becomes super low. And then you crack your Children of Corliss and you're back up full and you're like, sweet. Now I'm fine. And everyone else is going to die. Like,
and if you want, you can maybe try and repeat that somehow with any reanimation and then just double, like go up to like 70. It's great.
Oh man, yeah, with your stupid aura deck. Tune into the Patreon episode where Mike talks about his aura
And how
deck
stupid it is.
to hear my rage come through. I have to like stop Mike a couple times and be like, I need to jump in here and just say that what you're doing is bullshit.
And I hate it.
I hate that the deck does this. Well, what do we think of salt ratings on this one, guys?
I mean, I think it's pretty measured, a standard serving of salt. I think, it is the nature of 3-player games to be somewhat imbalanced in the sense of who is targeting who. So fortunately, I think depending on, your playgroup consistency and where you're playing, those are pretty rare. I will say, like, most people are playing 4-player, which is the way the format is really meant to be played. If you don't agree with that, fight me. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think, it sounds like it's memorable for this person specifically because they normally have a pretty salt-free existence, which is very nice for them.
True. If this is the worst salt you're seeing, I'm very happy for this player, or any player really, because that's like, you're almost more of a witness to the salt in this case, right? Too,
Yeah.
You did have a bad experience, which is salty in itself, but at least the game actions weren't going poorly in your favor,
Right. You got to ride in on this salty wave and take the win. That's not bad.
I think sometimes those wins that feel hollow like that can feel a little bit salty. Sure. Not really salty, but you're just sort of like, I didn't really do anything. But yeah, that's just sort of the nature of 3-player games. I think if you're doing a 3-player game with friends, you sort of have to come to this agreement like, hey, it's going to be weird. Like when we do 3-player games in our pod, we don't record them. Mm-hmm. We call them unsanctioned games, and we're like, let's just roll with it. Something weird is probably going to happen with the dynamic. If you are playing a 3-person game and you're trying to win in like a tournament setting or an event setting, play into that. Like, that dynamic is going to happen at some point where, somebody is going to become the threat. 2 people are probably going to gang up. So maybe you do a little bit of slow playing or, try to look unassuming, but that dynamic is bound to happen. So you can kind of jump on it if you really want to.
Yeah. I think I give this the salt rating here of being the girl on the Morton salt. Like, this is who you want to be. You've got your own umbrella. You're not getting rained on. Things aren't too bad for you. You got a big old grin, but you're just kind of tossing some salt out behind you as you go, just like spreading it around.
Yeah, there's a trail of salt behind you.
Yep.
Awesome. You guys want to jump to another?
Let's do it.
Let's dive into our Patreon and check out the Salt Council and get a story from there. This one comes to us from our buddy Prime Speaker Florian. Sup, Florian? And this is called Queenmaking is Bullshit. And it goes, I never knew that I could become so salty over love. Today, I had a nice round of some sweet games with a couple. Quite balanced games, actually. But silly enough, they all would be after the same schematic. I became a problem. He tries to handle me, while she tries to understand the situation and builds up her board. Then I overcome his assault and kill him. In dying, he made sure to give her as much advantage as possible. For example, sacking all of his creatures into a greater good to draw a massive amount of cards and not paying for her smothering tithe to give her like 20 odd treasures. Geez, come on and just die and enjoy the show. He justified his actions with, this is how I play Magic the Gathering. You kill me, I will do whatever I can to fuck you over. Woof. I took a sharp breath through my teeth and destroyed all artifacts and enchantments, smiling at him. I'm not a fan of queen or king making. If you are a couple, even less. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's tough.
I will say no one ever pays smothering tithe, so I don't really blame him on that part.
Yeah, that is so true, dude. Like literally no one ever pays it.
It does sound like the problem wasn't not paying for it. It was actively trying to trigger it as much as possible. But yeah, it's tough. I'm glad that the story kind of starts with, they were all pretty balanced games, because as long as that's true, it's kind of hard to get around someone that's going to behave like this. Like, it's less of something that you can address with that player, and it's more of something that you just can know that you're going to get in the experience if you choose to play with that player. And like, sometimes you'll want that and sometimes you won't.
Well, it's funny because it sounds like this is a 3-player game also.
Yeah, it does.
But that's not really the source of the salt, but that dynamic might be there a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we stand by, if you're going to negatively impact me, I'm going to do everything I can to negatively impact you.
So this is the question I have, because I think there's two things at play, and I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts are, because it sounds like there's one aspect which is the queen/king making, but the other one is just the straight up spite play.
Yeah.
Right? And like, which is like, in your guys' mind, what is better or worse? It seems like the offending player here was kind of trying to spin it to be like, no, I'm not king making, I'm just being a dick because I'm spite playing. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, to me, it's very different.
Right.
Even if the outcome is similar, like if let's say the three of us are playing and like Mike screws me over, right? If I blow up a bunch of stuff on if I blow up a stuff on Mike's board before I die, I feel totally justified, even if the outcome is that now Mike is depowered a little bit and he loses and Nick wins. However, if I am like, I'm going to use my target player draws X spell to give Nick 20 cards before I die, now I feel like I'm directly king making, even though the outcome is the same, but like the path there is very different.
Right.
Yeah, true. It's also one of those things where if they were going to just lie about why they did it, though, they probably would have said like, oh, I wanted to dig for an answer, you know? So I think there is some believability in like, they truly just like to spite in however they can. But I don't know if it's different, if it's strictly like negatively impacting the person you want or positively impacting another player at the table. And I think in a 3-person game, it's kind of the same thing, but it would be really different in a 4-person game.
Well, that's the thing, right? The 3 versus 4 kind of matters a lot here, because it becomes like, well, if you are going to king make, who are you choosing and why? And if you're just choosing your significant other because you like your significant other, then it's like, oh, you're just, playing favorites here.
Yeah.
Versus like this other 4th player that may or may not exist and we have no context about. And it makes a significant difference to be like, well, you could have chose them to give all this benefit to, and you didn't. You chose this other player who happens to be somebody you have close relations with. And now it just looks like you're king making again.
Close relations, huh?
Close relations.
King making is a weird situation in a 3-person game too, because it's kind of unavoidable to some extent.
Right.
Like just by playing, just by virtue of playing, if I attack Nick and I don't attack Mike on a specific turn, that's weakening Nick. Yeah, technically I am
that's
weakening
a spike
Nick
play.
And I'm not weakening Mike with that game decision, like it. Or I do think this is sort of an over-the-top example of actual king making in this sense, where it's like, well, I want them to have 20 fucking treasures, so I'm just gonna draw even though I'm gonna die. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like a weird dynamic, especially with couples, like you said, Nick. Like that kind of stuff. We've talked about it before. There can be like backseat driving. There can be like favoritism at the table, and that stuff. It's just kind of like hard to suss out because you can't really. You can't really have a direct impact on that.
It's so situational, right? Because it totally depends on the dynamic of the players. Because like oftentimes, or maybe not oftentimes, but in some cases, right, you have one player who is very much into Magic and another, their partner is just tagging along to play that game and they don't know the game. Other times both players are very into it and they're very against each other when they play, and they're like to the point earlier, right, they get very head to head,
the blood feud.
Like they have a blood feud between them because of all this other stuff going on. So like, oh man, each one of those is like its own unique little snowflake of a salty situation.
Well, that was something that on our guest episode with the Pay the One guys that Sonny said about his wife Rose, where he was like, when we play games, we're homies. We're not in a relationship anymore. Like we are we are buds and we're gonna play a game. And then when the game is done, she's my wife again. And we're all lovey-dovey. But in the game, I'm like, fuck you, dude,
Well, the funny part was especially that their version of being homies while playing the game was essentially being anything but homies, like like right after each other's throats.
Not friendly. Yeah. Oh man, I do love that though. Like sometimes when I get so salty, I will just throw whatever I have at somebody. Usually it's like, I mean, I think this is kind of like a setup where this is very unique. Like someone has a greater good and a bunch of creatures to sack, and someone else has a smothering tide. It's like, man, what a perfect storm to set up somebody for a win. Usually when I'm getting knocked out, it's like, okay, I have one rock with my Togo that I can throw at the person who knocked me out. And do I do 2 damage to their face out of total spite, or do I like kill a mana dork, you know?
Or Gieda.
Yeah, I definitely do that.
You kill an angel is what you do.
Yep. Well, what do you guys think about the salty score for this one? What's your salt rating?
Yeah, it's pretty salty.
It's up there.
Yeah.
The nuance, but like if you're having to negotiate the nuance between what qualifies as a spite play versus what qualifies as king making in a game,
both of those options are high salt. Like those are both top tier sodium levels.
Yeah, it's like, do you want the soy sauce, or do you want just like straight up seaweed paper or whatever, something else equally as umami between the two?
Yeah, both a strong flavor.
Yeah, it's choice between tamari sauce and soy sauce. It's like this is almost the exact same thing, and the outcome is the same, but it's one is like gluten free. I guess
one is mildly more palatable, and you're like, okay, let's hope it's that one.
Yeah, right. Oh man, I think I'd be more happy with a spite play.
I think I would too.
Exactly. I think it would it's like it's got the edge off of it a little bit. You put a spite play on everything, but you don't want king making on everything.
And I want to earn that spite play, that speaks to like the fruit of my labor a little bit in a game.
I worked hard for that spite play
versus someone just favoring another player, for some other reason.
Right.
I agree completely.
All right. Well, you guys want to hit our third post here?
Hell yeah.
Do it.
Sweet. This one comes to us from the EDH subreddit, our home base. And this one comes to us from user Boarf2. If you guys see user...
Is he half man, half dog?
Like Boarfad's nuts?
Oh, man, you beat me. That was better. I was going with the Spaceballs reference. You just went straight up with the balls reference.
Oh, man.
Just dumbing it down instead. I did.
It definitely wins. Oh, gosh. Yeah, it's like barf, but with an O in it as well. Boarf2. So if you guys see Boarf2 on the EDH subreddit, give him an upvote. You know the drill. Spread that goodwill. And the post title is it your obligation to correct your opponent's play?
No.
Huh?
Just wait.
Your obligation.
Is it your obligation to correct your opponent's play?
Correct is a strong word.
Well, let's just see. So the post says, as I was playing a few times ago, I figured that I was always telling people what to do, what triggers they had, and sometimes I noticed that I would give my opponents a win depending on their board state for a trigger they were about to miss. So a while ago, I decided to stop myself from doing that, and my opponent's cards were their responsibility and not mine, since when it was the other way around, nobody would correct me or tell me about my missed stuff. In your opinion, even if I know about a missed trigger or interaction with someone else's card, should I tell them? Or should I just play my cards and let their problems be theirs?
Interesting.
It is interesting.
I feel like the three of us have talked about this in depth before in person, and I think we might have touched on this a little bit in another episode, but I feel like it's a good one when we have Nick on the show.
I think we've also shifted around on this a lot. Like I know my opinion has moved around on this in the past.
Well, we talk about it a lot in the context of missed, like Nick just whispered into the mic, Ristic study triggers and things like that, especially in CDH, because sometimes we're just fucking sleepy boys and we miss them.
Yeah. I kind of have this mentality that in general, putting the trigger on the stack is a part of the game operating smoothly. And I think it's good form to, in general, help other players with triggers and stuff. And I include Ristic in that. And for things like Smothering Tithe, I actually think like if if the onus is on some other player to pay something, and that's the May ability of it, that if you don't say anything, you're just essentially giving the treasure, and that's like the default. And so I think it's overall good form, but I think in like a tournament or if you're like aggressively trying to win and that's super, super important to you, I think it's okay to like not directly point out a May, but any version of like trying to play fast to get through something like that is a little scummy.
Yeah. So some background here that I think is important, because you don't think about it. The wording for Smothering Tithe and Rhystic Study is very different in terms of whose trigger it is.
Yeah.
The wording on Rhystic Study says, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1.
Yep.
So you are in possession of the May trigger, versus Smothering Tithe. Smothering Tithe says, whenever an opponent draws a card, this player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a treasure token. So the onus is now on the opposing player rather than yourself. And so Mike, Sam, and I had a pretty, not heated, but a pretty deep conversation about like,
you guys are wrong.
It was definitely a moment where we were like I was a little salty, and we were all trying to remain like kind of level-headed, but also like clearly had emotions tied up in it.
Well, what happened was Mike missed a bunch of fucking triggers.
Yeah, it just played bad.
And he was like, well, I think everyone should be responsible for the triggers. And we were like, yeah, but you should also definitely be on it. And we were like, yeah, but I think it's kind of everyone's responsibility.
The one thing to point out, though, to go back to the op really quick, I think this only really applies for May triggers. I think for like actual triggers that need to go on the stack because they're required to go on the stack, I think you should definitely call those out. And like, otherwise you're just playing the game incorrectly and like breaking the rules. And like to some extent it's bound to happen. Like board states just get complicated and triggers get missed. But I think like that is generally a shared responsibility across the table to say like, hey, this is a trigger that needs to go on the stack and it needs to be resolved properly, versus the Mays, I think, are a bit different and should be handled a little bit differently.
Yeah. And I agree with that generally too.
It's interesting you say that, Nick, because I think like the point that we brought up on a previous episode was that everybody at the table should have their goal to play a clean game. And that is to like honor triggers, honor priority, all that kind of stuff. Granted, this is coming from a group that likes to play CDH. So I don't think we really gave as much of a shit about this stuff before we played CDH. And as we got deeper and deeper into CDH, we're taking these practices of very clean play and carrying them back into casual games too.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the best things that we've brought over from our CDH gameplay, honestly. I really appreciate it when we then go to sit down and play a casual game.
Yep. I think for me, it's just board state. Whether it's a Smothering Tithe trigger, a Rhystic Study trigger, it's board state. Even if it's a May trigger, May triggers go on the stack, and you choose, as they resolve, you choose whether or not to use them, So it's not like I think a lot of people fall back on the like, well, it was a May trigger, so you don't fucking get it, or you forgot it, or whatever, which to some extent is true. I think if you get far enough away from a trigger, it's just kind of like, hey, tough shit. Yeah. But May triggers do go on the stack. It's not like you're choosing to put them on the stack or not. They go on the stack, and as they resolve, you choose the effect. That is how those
like if you were
work.
playing in a rules engine, you wouldn't have to like remember to click the thing that you have a May trigger on when something happens. The rules engine would handle it for you.
Right.
So if you think of the gameplay group collectively running the rules engine, then you want to be putting those May triggers on the stack. But
exactly,
one of
Mike
the main
is a little
points
sleepy or drunk, there's 3 other engines that are going to pick up on those rules.
Well, so that goes to the next point, right? which you guys made that's really strong, which is everyone should realistically be responsible for their own triggers because opponents' board states get really complicated.
Yeah.
If you have to own managing their board states too, that can be frustrating and kind of sucks. So you shouldn't have to do that. On the other hand, this post is more saying, I'm having no problem maintaining my opponent's board states. Like I know exactly what triggers are going on and stuff, and I'm just not going to say anything about it.
Yep.
Like that just means that your opponents maybe are worse at catching triggers than you. So they're probably newer and they could probably use your help. If anything, like point out your own triggers a little bit more too, and that can help sometimes like slow things down.
Yeah, I think there's a higher level point beyond just the may versus shall triggers, which is like, especially I'm assuming this player is playing a casual setting versus CDH, because I think it does differ quite a bit. But I think, you know, you have to balance it, right? Because you want people to learn the game, but you also want people to learn the game, right? Like at a certain point, you do have to kind of like throw them in the deep end and be like, okay, I'm not going to play the game for you anymore. You have to like figure it out, and you're going to mess up, and people are going to exploit that within the context of like still playing the game to the rules technically, right? Because there's like, I've been in situations where we'll be playing a casual game and somebody will cast a spell and somebody will point out like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? This is on the board. And people will take it back. Be like, oh, never mind. I didn't see that. I'm going to do this instead. And like, I have various degrees of acceptability on that. If you've been playing for a long time and you're still doing that shit, not going to fly. I will not take that. Like that is 100% on you. Like you get like maybe one take back during a game, and that's it. If you continuously are like, I'm going to float this spell out and point it at this thing, and then somebody else like, oh, are you really sure you want to do that? It's going to get blown up immediately. And I'm going to say, never mind. I'm going to point it at this thing instead. That's not cool. Like that's just not fun to play against. It like throws off the balance for everybody else. It becomes this very political thing if everybody's trying to like, well, you should look at that. How about that? Look at that. It's like, no, just pay attention to the freaking game. So
yeah, I agree with you there. I do also think that there's room for politics, though. Like sometimes the spell goes on a stack and points at a target, and the table can be like, yo, dude, that's not the threat. Fucking hit the other thing. And, you know, sometimes I think that's very valid. But if someone is just not paying attention and they're just throwing shit out, and it's like, yeah, you can target my thing, but you're going to have to sacrifice one of your creatures if you destroy my creature because I have this effect out in play.
Right.
You know, like that stuff starts to get kind of bullshit. It's that idea of clean play. Like, and you know, we're all here to have a fun game and be casual. And I think at some point, some people want it to be more of like a laid back board game where rules kind of come and go, things get forgotten, whatever. We're still having a good time. And for us, a good time involves clean play and precise rules because we're all kind of rules guys, except for Tony.
He abides.
Yeah,
he abides.
So it is fun for us when the rules are like at their most efficient, you know?
Yeah.
It kind of goes to like a rules enforcement level thing, like REL, and like in competitive environments, you really are responsible for triggers in specific ways, and it's very written out. You know, who has to keep track of triggers, who's responsible if one gets missed, what you can do if certain ones that were, you know, mandatory triggers got missed, like how you roll the game around from that point. And I sort of feel like there's, even in casual, like rule enforcement level, there's still either a gradient or a couple levels of it, where one is, we all know what we're doing and we're playing I would call it a somewhat serious casual game where we're all trying to play the game correctly. And, you know, maybe it's the first game of the day or a new deck, or like there's something going on that are making people play in that way. But there's also like, you're having a couple beers with some friends and you're joking around already anyway. And it becomes funny to be like, ooh, no, then never mind. I'll target this instead. Cause like,
so
what?
true.
And then one person who's now getting targeted is like, what? And everyone else is like, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Don't worry about that. You know,
yeah, you can take that back. We have so many moments where I feel like this has become like a motto for us lately, where someone will have like a really bad misplay in a casual game. And then we'll be like, yeah, well, it's casual, so I'll just take it back. And everyone's like, we didn't say you could take it back. And then the person's like, I'm just doing it anyways.
or the other tried and true, like, I'm going to take this back. And then we're like, okay, that's fine. But you have to sacrifice 3 lands in order to do that.
But if you win, we know it's because of this.
Yeah, we're putting an asterisk.
Yeah, exactly. A caveat. So, I mean, this isn't like a super salty story, but how do you guys feel about this in general? Like when mistriggers are happening, does it get your salt up? I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, so I'm kind of curious to like what were the other players' perspective on this, because I feel like part of the reason Op is posting this is because they're getting perhaps frustrated because the other players are not really doing their due diligence and picking up the slack. The counterpoint might be true, which is perhaps the other players are sick of this person pointing everything out, and they're like, "No, I got it. Let me do it." Trying to be more independent. So I don't know. It kind of cuts both ways.
It's a fine line.
So there's definitely some salt here. It's hard to say where the kind of origin is, though.
Yeah,
I think the level of salt here is determined by like how bad this player is feeling because no one else is helping them with their triggers, honestly. Like that's an important part of this post, is like, no one helps me when I miss stuff, And so if that's kind of a dynamic where you're feeling like it's imbalanced, then it honestly is kind of reasonable to stop pointing it out, because like you can level set again and be like, fine, I'll just focus on my own triggers. You guys all focus on your own triggers too. So there's definitely some salt there, but I also suspect that these are some new players, and I think some of this will mellow out as they kind of mature in their magic greatness.
Mature. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think when this kind of stuff happens to me, I don't really get salty, but again, I'm like a rules guy. I kind of enjoy helping people out in that way, and I don't always expect people to do that for me. I will say I never ever want to win a game because somebody missed a trigger that I knew about and I chose not to point out. I think that is akin to cheating, quite frankly. If someone has a win and they just didn't trigger a trigger, and then I win on my turn, I'm not going to feel good about that.
Yeah. It's somehow different if it's like these series of small little missed triggers here and there. Like that's, I'll take the value from that and say that I won on my own anyway. But like if it's one big thing, that does feel awful.
Yeah. Like if someone has no library and they cast Thassa's Oracle, then they just pass turn. You're like, actually, you do win the game. Guess I'll lose on my next turn. When I draw into my empty deck,
I'll play a Thassa's that does nothing because I have no cards to look at on the top.
Yeah, honestly, though, that person deserves to lose.
Yeah,
come on. If you're running Thassa's Oracle and don't know how it works, you deserve to lose.
I guess I'll just put out a blocker. This sweet merfolk I have. Oh man!
It also stems into the stuff that we fall to all the time, like. This week when we were playing, Sam had a win on board, but he had to stack some triggers correctly, and we were all just like desperately holding back, just explaining how it works to him. He was even like, he started by being like, okay, I think I have the win, but nobody tell me.
I was like, don't tell me, I want to figure it out.
Nick and I were like, okay, but all right, fine. Okay.
Nerd sniping. Sniping.
Yeah, it is nerd sniping. Even Nick was like Mike disconnected for a second just because spell table's bad sometimes, and came back and Nick was like, Mike, don't tell him. And then like a minute later, Nick was like, you could do it this way. Oh god.
And then we were like, or this way or this way or this way. There were like 3 different lines.
Yeah, I think that situation, it was just like I could have done it anyway and it probably would have been fucking fine. But like it felt more foolproof after I started doing it than I thought it was, but it was confusing me.
I think my favorite instance of that was when we were playing CDH at Sam's house, and I was playing Elsha, and I just like had the win con but didn't know how to execute it, and Sam just literally walked me step by step on how to It's like, this is what you do this, now this, okay, now here's the Underworld Breach combo. Like,
that's a great thing about that too, is that combo specifically, we like was such a clear memory for our group that now if you're ever shady on a breach combo, we're all like, you just got to know what it is.
Exactly.
We're not gonna help.
Well, when I first introduced like the first breach deck into the group, I just like fell in love with the combo. And then whenever anyone else would start a breach loop, I'd be like salivating. I'd be like, oh my God. Or if someone was building a CDH deck, I'd be like, you think you could fit a breach loop in there? Like, I was just intense on breach loops for so long. And now I don't even play a deck with breach loops. I got to change that.
Yeah. Anywho. It is one of the craziest cards in the format.
It's wild. Well, I think it might be that time of the week, guys.
Is it that time?
I think so.
What time is it?
It's the time of the week where we say, Mike, what's the salty card of the week?
Salty card? What? Mike? Who? Where?
Well, Sam, the salty card
Huh?
of the week.
It's the salty card of the week. That's all I got.
Nice.
It's a little short one.
Short, sweet, and to the salt.
Short,
Sam.
sweet, and to
Hey.
the song.
Well, our salty card of the week this week is Elish Norn Grand Cenobite.
Classic.
Ooh, love.
Truly a classic.
Can you say it in its correct pronunciation, please?
Is it not Cenobite?
Well, I was going to say in the like, however you do that Phyrexian pronunciation.
Yeah, with the clashes and the
Yeah, the
slashes or
clangs
whatever
and
those
everything.
sounds are.
I think
Yeah.
it's pronounced Elish Nornusi
Oh,
Grand
God.
Cenobite.
He did it. He fucking did it.
He
The,
did
Doesn't
it.
help
the
himself.
fans demand it.
The fans demand it.
When we launched our shirt, when we launched our t-shirt website, people were, up in arms that we didn't have an Elish Nornusi shirt.
Yeah, that's not something I would wear in public.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Yeah, I wouldn't even wear it in private, honestly.
That's one of those playmats that you cringe at when you see it at the cave
Oh,
yeah.
store.
Yes.
That's one of the ones where they ask you to not play with
Yeah,
the
don't come
children
back.
at the store.
Right.
They're like, don't don't pair him up with the kids.
Literally, don't talk to me or my son ever again.
Yeah, quite literally. All right, tell us all about Elish Norn, Mike.
Elish Norn, it's a 5 and 2 white. So 5 white, 7 mana for legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. It has vigilance, and other creatures you control get +2/+2, and creatures your opponents control get -2/-2.
So simple.
It's
Love
a
it.
4/7.
Love it.
Yep.
I do love it. It's great. So, on that note, Nick, how do you feel about Elish Norn?
I like it. I think it's a great card. It was one of the, I feel like times have shifted quite a bit. White has definitely regained a lot of power over the past couple of years, but there was a
Mhm.
time where white was like notably bad,
Yeah.
and Elish Norn was like one of the standout cards in white
Mhm.
in particular in the time where there was nothing else really to show for it. So I think it's great. It's definitely very powerful. The -2 like just keeps stuff off the board very cleanly.
Yeah.
And it makes it very hard to deal with. Personally, I don't have too much problem with it. I think it's pretty fairly costed. It's 7 mana or whatever. That's up there.
Mhm.
I'm at the point in my kind of EDH career, if you will, where 7 mana cards need to be winning me the game or they're not going to stay in the deck. So I think that generally qualifies for Elish Norn. I think she's up there
Yeah.
enough and a powerful enough effect that it's probably going to win me the game or at least tilt the game significantly in my favor very quickly.
Totally. Sam, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I love Elish Norn. I think it's a fantastic creature. It's a really powerful effect. It's mommy, quite frankly.
Oh, God.
Oh, man.
That hurt to say that.
No, it didn't. I saw the smile.
Yeah, I fucking love it. No, I think it's fantastic. It's one of those things where it is kind of a stacks effect, sort of. It's not as stacksy as some of the other Praetors out there. It doesn't make me as salty as, say, Vorinclex, which is like fucking crazy salt. I think that's in like the top 5 or 10 salty cards pretty consistently, because it's almost like a Winter Orb effect. With Elish, it's kind of in the middle for me. It's super powerful, but again, like Nick said, it's 7 mana, pretty fairly costed for the effect, and you're not going to lose everything when you play into it. But I love that it's a win con. Frankly, it's a win con in all levels of play. You can battle cruiser this out on turn 7, 8, or 9 and have like a pretty big effect on the board. Or, it's even pretty good in CDH. Some decks do play Elish Norn because creatures are so low to the ground in CDH that they just die, and it can wipe out a bunch of stacks pieces. It can turn your stacks pieces into like pretty beefy beaters. So there is some really cool stuff I like there. I'm actually going to probably be putting Elish Norn into my Marath deck as a win.
Yeah,
con.
but that's just because you like that it combos with Living Plane. You
Exactly.
sicko.
I know.
You
Yeah. I am a sicko. And it does combo with Living Plane, which I love. And you kill everyone's lands And then when they play a land, it just dies immediately as a state-based action, which is fucking hot. Also, Urborg and Cormuspell is another great way of doing that. I also think that like there is this CDH deck, the CDH build that I want to shout out, which is Timno Sakashima. It's a Esper deck, and typically I think that's built right now as more of like an Adnaz deck with just like valued creatures, like a little bit farm, a little bit Adnaz. But there is also a stacks build of it. And then there's this sort of middle build that is a reanimator build. And one of the cool things you can do is put an Elish Norn in your graveyard and reanimate it, and then cast your Sakashima to have 2 Elish Norns. So all of your creatures get +4/+4, and all opposing creatures get -4/-4. And that's a win con right there. Like, it's super hard to play into. So I think it's a really versatile card. Got a ton of power. I mean, I pretty much got nothing but love for it.
So it's interesting you bring up Vorinclex. I was just checking the stats, and Mike, I don't want to blow up your spot, so feel free to cut this if this is your thing.
Oh, we have to guess. We're supposed to guess.
Well, this is a different number. This is not Salty's card number, but just in terms of the number of decks each are in, because you said Vorinclex you think is more salty, but it's actually in about a third of the decks that Elish Norn is in, which I think is really surprising. I would have expected that to be flipped. I would have expected Vorinclex to be in way more things than Elish Norn.
It could be a situation where it's such a salty card that people stray away from it too.
Yeah,
you know, like
possible.
I think Elish
is.
has that effect where you're like -2/-2. Okay, I get it. This creature, this ruins me sometimes. Like sometimes I'm going to be super salty about it, but sometimes I'm just going to see it and accept it. And, you know, my creatures are nerfed. And I think that's kind of why we all reacted where we were like, oh, nice. It's like, ouch, you're going to be salty when you see it across the table.
Yeah.
But okay, I get it. It's an acceptable level of this for the table.
There's like a sacredness to lands that does not exist for creatures. So it's like, you know, you play Elish Norn, you're like, yeah, my creatures, some of them are going to die. Oh, well, you know, probably got board wiped already anyways. You get board wiped 3 or 4 times, you get frustrated. But if one of your lands gets blown up, you're like, fuck you. You know?
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah.
But if you play Living Plane,
You
can
bastard.
have it all.
I'm just going to play Yokel Hops because I love
There you go.
good Yokel Hops.
So, you guessed the next part. What
Well, we didn't
What do you
get to
think?
you, Mike. What
Yeah,
do you
well,
think about
that was sort of my pitch on it. You know, I
Okay.
like it. I think it's in terms of things that'll make you feel bad, because it will make you feel bad when you see it. It's a fair one of it. It's still just a creature. You can still, you know, dies to Doomblade card. So it's fine. And like, you know, your deck might not be able to handle it and you might just be kind of out of the game, but one of 3 people is going to have an answer for this, and they can still draw cards. They can still cast their spells. They can still find something to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it usually does get dealt with at some point. So this one definitely hurts, but it's fine too. You deal with it.
So where's this on the list of salty cards, Mike?
Well, why don't you guys try to take a guess?
Ooh, I think 69.
Damn,
Nice.
I was going to do that.
Yeah.
You can both guess 69. There's
No,
nothing in the
no.
rules says you can't.
I'm going to choose 42.
Ooh.
Nice. 420
Classic.
shout out.
Oh,
I
also a
was
good
thinking
one.
more
Well,
of
more hitchhikers.
Yeah, thank you.
Whatever.
Stoner.
For us,
Not
us
anymore.
sci-fi nerds.
As much.
Well, you should have
Two
both
different
gone with
types of people.
69, unfortunately, because it is 65. So 69
Hey,
is closer.
nice.
But he went over, and therefore, by Price is Right rules, I win. So
We're just straight
Nailed
up
it.
closeness, though, because we're fine with a tie. Yeah, so 65. Way,
Interesting.
way higher than the other Praetors, which we kind of guessed.
It's higher
right?
than the. Oh yeah.
Sorry,
I'm
higher
I'm
in
thinking
number. So
higher-
less
higher number,
salty
lower on the
generally.
list. Yeah.
Like all
makes
the other
sense.
Praetors were like 10, 12, like way up there.
Yeah, I think Urabrask is like 2, right? Losing haste is very horrible.
So bad.
R.I.P. Urabrask.
Urabrask is barely a fucking praetor, man. Like
even in the story too. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have read the story, but like he's
Yeah,
just
he's
like,
just
I'm
chilling.
doing my own thing. Fuck
He's
you
like, "Eh,
guys.
I don't really want to
I'm
do
gonna be
that
over here. Like, man, it shows.
I hope
You
in
got some shit cards,
Didn't he
Urabrask.
like get the stuff from Kaldheim that made the world tree possible though?
no, he went to Capenna. That was
Oh, that was
thinking of
Vorinclex.
Vorinclex, yeah.
Right. Never mind.
He was in
But
Capenna.
Halo
he
was
just
relevant.
sipping on that scissor. He was just sipping on that Halo scissor.
Yeah, that's relevant to all the Phyrexia stuff, I think.
It is,
Lore-wise.
yeah.
Storyline wise, yeah.
Well, that wraps up the salty card of the week.
Sweet.
Well, thanks, Mike. That was a lovely salty card of the week. Nick, thanks for helping us out today, man.
Hey,
Yeah, we really appreciate it, dude. It's awesome to have you on.
no problem. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning into another episode of the Howling Salt Mine podcast. If you want more Howling Salt Mine, join our Patreon. We have bonus episodes every month. We have stray grains that are coming out pretty much every week. We're like sprinkling those into your feed. Tune in. That's our short form show. If you want to represent the Howling Salt Mine brand, we got fucking merch now, everybody. We have a bonfire store. You can get a blue is a trash color for trash people shirt. You can get a Howling Salt Mine podcast logo shirt, or you can get the borderless Howling Salt Mine logo shirt, which is very sexy for nighttime stuff. I couldn't even say it. I couldn't even say it.
Is that what you call it, Sam? Nighttime stuff?
Let's do some
Close relations.
Let's do some nighttime stuff and have close relations.
Oh man, this is the most mature podcast of all time.
It really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we earn that explicit rating. Actually, we don't. We just swear. Talk about nuts. If you guys have a salty story, send it to us. We love to read your salty stories on the show, your salty confessionals. You can send those to our Gmail, thehowlingsaltmine@gmail.com, or you can DM them to us on Twitter, Instagram. All of our socials are in our link tree, which are in the show notes. If you haven't given us a 5-star review, that really does help increase the visibility of our podcast, helps people find it out in the wild and all that cool stuff. Also, something that's been super helpful lately is retweeting our stuff on Twitter. If you're a fan, just like give it a little bit of a boost and more people can find it. We seem to be getting some cool traction over Twitter, which has been a lot of fun.
Give Sam that sweet, sweet hit of dopamine that he so craves.
Exactly. I do a bunch of really like stupid photoshops of cards every once in a while.
The Sam one was hilarious.
the Samwise Dino Nuggies one was pretty good. It took off in kind of a big way.
Oh man.
Yeah, so check that out.
He's kind of a big deal, guys.
I'm such a little deal. I'm such a small deal, but I would appreciate it.
Stroke his ego just a little bit.
No, please don't. Please. And of course, this is such an unhinged ending to an episode.
Perfect. Nailed it.
I can't keep it together. And of course, we have to shout out our amazing podcast artist, JD Burnett. If you're ever in Asheville, North Carolina, hit him up, get a tattoo. He's a really awesome guy and graced us with some fantastic art for the show. Thanks again, everybody. Stay salty, and don't forget to draw an additional card during your draw step.
It's the Howling Salt Mine. The Howling Salt Mine.
Mike, I just got a notification for Tony's Seussical thing tonight at 9 p.m.
Really?
Yeah, because I guess it was on our calendar. It's funny because I don't get notifications for anything else on the calendar, and Tony must have set this up and put a notification on it. And I just got a text that says, "Calendar, Tony in Seussical at 9."
I am required to disclose per the Discord that I am not a permanent member of the podcast crew. I am relegated to guest status.
Yeah, that was super funny where Sugi Time on our Patreon Discord was like, wow, Nick misses a lot of episodes. I was like, Nick is like a guest host. Do you think he's ghosting us on like 90% of the shows we do? That would be fucking crazy.
All I'm saying is
I think
starting
honored
a campaign.
guest. I think you're in the honored guest spot though.
Mythical.
You're no I don't know. I'm not going to shit on any other guest, but
Say it, Mike. Say it.
I will not. Oh,
So-
before we do though, I did look up the German word for when you find something out like that, and it's finding shit out.
No way. That's bullshit.
That's
I googled
horseshit.
it.
No way.
No way.
You should have Scryfalled it. That's false.
I should have Scryfalled it. That would have gotten me the answer so
Yeah,
much quicker.
I heard Scryfall is a better search engine for everything except Magic cards.
Yeah, it is.
I'm leaving.
Sometimes you just use Bing, you know?
Yeah, you got to use the new Bing using NordVPN, of course.
Yeah, using NordVPN exactly.
All right, let's hit it.